My guest at this time is Hans von Spakovsky. He manages the Election Law Reform Initiative at the Heritage Foundation. He's also a former Justice Department official. Hans joins me today to provide analysis on the story out of Texas, where officials there are trying to find out whether up to 95,000 non-citizens are registered to vote and whether some 58,000 of those actually voted. And Hans, thanks so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me back.
Well, let me read a little bit from the Fox News story here. Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton announced Friday that the state has discovered 95,000 non-citizens on the voter rolls going back to 1996, 58,000 of whom have voted in at least one Texas election, an announcement likely to raise fresh concerns about the prospect of voter fraud. And he also points out here that Texas has some of the toughest voter ID laws in the nation. So, first of all, what's your reaction to what the Texas Attorney General has revealed here?
First of all, it's no surprise. It's no surprise because it just complements the other evidence that has been found from many other states across the country that non-citizens are illegally registering and voting. Here in Texas, they basically took a look at DMV records, individuals who, when they came in to get a driver's license, produced documentation like a green card indicating that they were not a U.S. citizen, and then compared it with a voter registration list. And they discovered, like I said, almost 100,000 individuals, non-citizens, folks here legally, who also were registered to vote.
So explain where we are right now in this, because as I just read that story, it seems like that's what was found. President Trump tweeted out earlier today those numbers as if they were facts, and you got a lot of blowback saying there's a whole lot more investigating to do here. So where do we stand in determining whether this is actually the fact here?
Well, what they're going to have to do is investigate each of those cases and determine whether the individual was a U.S. citizen when they actually registered. I think what they're going to find is that a large percentage of these individuals were, in fact, not U.S. citizens when they registered to vote. Why do I say that? Well, because federal reports indicate that the majority of folks who register to vote do so when they go to a state driver's license bureau and get a license. So I think they're probably going to find that a very large number of these 95,000 individuals registered to vote at the very same time that they went in to get a driver's license as a legal non-citizen in the country. It's certainly possible that some percentage of these folks only registered later once they had become naturalized. I have no doubt that's the case. But I think they're going to find probably that a large number of these individuals were registering and possibly voting before they became U.S. citizens.
How difficult will that be to find out?
Well, what they're doing is the state has sent this information to all of the county election officials across the state, and those election officials are going to have to basically open up an investigation of each and every name they have received of someone who's registered in their county that state records show is not a U.S. citizen, and they're going to have to individually investigate each case.
Now, as you said, and as the New York Times, who originally broke this story, pointed out, that this was done by looking at records of the Texas Department of Public Safety. So it wasn't even really combing through the voter rolls. They just happened to find this information. But at the same time, it means that the government was going through an 11-month investigation into at least the public safety records. So how often do you recommend that states go through voter rolls in order to make sure they're as up-to-date as possible, not only regarding citizenship, but also regarding folks who may have died or moved or any other factor that could potentially throw off the number of people in a state or even a smaller jurisdiction that are eligible to vote?
Well, to the extent that the databases that the state have are computerized, that's certainly the case for state voter registration records these days. It's certainly the case for DMV driver's license records. Those ought to be checked on a monthly basis. That is the only way to keep voter rolls up to date and to ensure that people who are not eligible to vote are not getting registered and casting illegal votes.
Now, in his tweet, which I mentioned before has gotten a little bit of blowback, Trump not only pointed out what was happening in Texas, he also called out California. Now, California's got a state government that's probably not going to be too eager to dig into this, but is he mainly saying that because of how badly he lost the popular vote there? Is there a lot of evidence that something like this could be happening there as well? What do we know about California in particular?
Yeah, there have been isolated cases, mostly found by accident, indicating that California may have a substantial problem with non-citizens registering and voting. And they've made that problem worse because California last year switched to an automatic voter registration system. This is a system in which if you go to get a driver's license, and in California you can get a driver's license not only if you're a non-citizen who's here legally, but also illegally. But if you go get a driver's license, they won't ask you if you'd like to register to vote. They automatically register you to vote. And the state depends on that individual to go back to the government and say, oh, you shouldn't have registered me, I'm not eligible. So the chances are, unfortunate, very high, that they are automatically registering a substantial number of individuals who are non-citizens and shouldn't be registered.
Let's say hypothetically that after further investigation, these numbers in Texas prove to be essentially right. What do you expect the fallout to be? Is this going to be a red state, blue state thing where the red states go combing through and the blue states say this is a conspiracy of some sort? Or do you think there's going to be a nationwide effort to make sure everything's the way it should be?
I'm afraid that blue states like Massachusetts, New York, California, they don't care about any of this. Those states have some of the worst records in terms of maintaining the accuracy of their voter rolls. I think other states, more red states, will be interested in trying to do something about this in keeping non-citizens off the voter rolls and potentially prosecuting those who do this knowingly. It's unfortunate that we have such a breakdown in cleaning up this problem, but that's unfortunately just the way it is.
And you ran into that as well when you were on the President's Commission to look into election integrity. The commission essentially had to fold because states didn't want their data being sent to the commission. Why are some of these states simply resistant to the idea of not only not handing them over to a federal commission, but just making sure they're up to date?
Well, I think what was found in Texas answers the first part of that question. States like California and New York said they wouldn't provide us with that data because I think they were afraid of what we would find, and that we would find, particularly in places like California with large numbers of non-citizens, that we would find the kind of problem that Texas has found. Unfortunately, there are a lot of politicians in places like California who think that anyone who's in the country should be able to vote, whether they're a non-citizen or not, and they don't really want any rules or laws in place that prevent ineligible individuals from voting.
Do you feel like that distinction's being lost as we go along here, Hans? There's clearly a divide between left and right on this, but the significance of citizenship seems to be more debatable, I guess, the more this issue keeps being talked about.
Oh, no, I think it's very clear that for the last 2 decades, the progressive liberals in this country have been doing everything they can to extinguish the line not only between legal and illegal immigration, but to try to extinguish the line between people who are citizens and people who are non-citizens. They've made it clear that they want open borders and that they want everyone who's in this country, even if they're not a citizen, even if they're here illegally, to have the same rights and privileges as American citizens.
We'll be watching, see what the officials in Texas can confirm for us, hopefully in short order. Hans, always good to have your analysis. Thank you, sir.
Thanks for having me.
You bet. Hans von Spakovsky manages the Election Law Reform Initiative at the Heritage Foundation. He's also a former Justice Department official. I'm Greg Columbus reporting for Radio America.